Welcome, everyone. Simon Rosenberg, Hopium Chronicles. It's great to be back with all of you. Tonight, we are here with our plucky and patriotic paid subscribers who, um, through their contribution to Hopium, make this place go every day. So thank you all so much for being here. We try to get together every week. We get together most weeks, and it's good to be back with everybody. Being in community here is so important in these challenging times. And whether we do it virtually or do it in person, these kinds of gatherings are always affirming and helpful, I think, as we steady ourselves every day during this incredible onslaught that Trump has thrown at us. So, my take on things, I think that two things to start. One is we are stronger and he is weaker. And we also must be acting with incredible urgency because Trump is breaking things that will be hard, if not impossible, to repair. And that both of these things that are true and can be true at the same time. That we are making progress, but there has to be urgency in everything that we do every day. And also, I want to say thanks to everyone here. I mean, the Hopium community, since we began a little more than 2 years ago, when I've called, or people have called, or history has called, or candidates have called, our democracy has called, you have repeatedly answered, and I'm just grateful for that. Reading the self-reports every day in the paid subscriber chat is the wind under my wings. It keeps me going. It inspires me to see all that you are doing all across the country. I feel blessed to be able to get these self-reports from all of you doing this work. It reminds me of how vital and important it is. So thank you for that, and to both doing the work and in self-reporting, and for just caring about your country in a time of challenge. I do think that, I've gone through polling data in the last few days. I mean, I think whether it's the Morning Consult track or the Economist YouGov poll today or Reuters Ipsos, Trump has dropped between, 12 and 17 points in job approval in a very short period of time. It's incredibly rapid and steep, and he is in a different place now as a public figure than he was when he won the election. We're now in a completely different political era. We've moved past that period, the disappointing period of the election. We're now into these first Trump 100 days, 100 days of disappointment, failure, and betrayal, which is really what this has been. And Trump has taken a beating in his public standing. And I think that, as I've said here, I think one of the central things that we have to, when you look at the data, the central things that you see is that he is the core things that I think made him popular or acceptable anyway, with parts of the electorate that he needed to win this last election, particularly Hispanics and young men, and independents, that the things that brought them along for him at the end, when things broke against us at the end of the election, was, I think, two basic pillars of his brand. One is that with Trump, you get a better life, you get more money, you're around rich and famous people, right? There's success there. You want to associate with that. And then the second piece is that because he was a CEO, he could run things and make things work for the American people, be efficient, right? And get more juice out of the orange for the American people. And both of those fundamental brand positionings have been dramatically weakened in the last few months for good reason, right? I mean, Trump has been the worst president in American history with no near peer in this period of time. And so you're seeing him erode. And the reason why the erosion matters is the erosion is connected to how much courage people have to defy him. And it's the currency, it's the coin of the realm, right? We saw today 12 Republican House members say they were unwilling to sign on to large Medicaid cuts in the emerging budget deal. There is no Trump plan without large Medicaid cuts, right? It was 12. They signed a letter, and I know it's a negotiating position, but that was an open act of defiance against Trump and the elected leaders. Harvard did something deeply significant. Alan Garber, their president, gave us language and words and courage and patriotism all at once to show that defying Trump is now our obligation. It's not a choice any longer. And I think that Harvard's decision has already, Stanford and Yale and others have jumped on. I think it's going to ignite the legal community to fight harder. Um, and we've seen, Chris Van Hollen, Senator Van Hollen, fly all the way down to El Salvador today. We've seen Cory Booker give that incredibly impassioned speech. We've seen Bernie and AOC light up crowds all over the country. We've seen these town hall meetings that continue to happen where, you know, regular old Americans are coming and expressing their dissatisfaction. Courage is contagious. And the way this works in any society that is going through with what we've gone through is the only way this can happen is little by little, step by step, day by day of just doing the work, putting your head down and acting with defiance and passion and love of country. And you're seeing this happen more and more, in my view. Our movement has gotten stronger. There's no question that the Washington Democratic Party came out of the box slow, right? We've talked about this many times, but you're seeing far more activity. The House Democrats have not only done these national town halls with hundreds of thousands of people with the DNC, they're now doing, they've now held, I think, 4 shadow hearings, which is something that we had called for here. Hakeem Jeffries is doing daily press conferences, whether you see them or not. They're being very active on the press front. They've been filing now amicus briefs, and the first time the House and Senate Democrats joined together to file an amicus brief was this week. We saw unprecedented cooperation now, overdue, but it's happening, right? Where they're joining resources. We've seen the attorney generals, Democratic attorney generals, really step up. Today, we saw Gavin Newsom in the state of California sue Trump for his unconstitutional and illegal tariffs that he's put into place that have been so destructive for our economy. We've seen Tim Kaine lead a bipartisan effort in the Senate to try to rally the Senate against Trump's unconstitutional tariffs. You're seeing it if you want to see it, right? If you choose to see it, you can see all of these signs of progress on our side and signs of weakening for him. And I think this is critical. And it is not sufficient. We can't be satisfied, but nor can we ignore it, because the only way this does happen is the way it's actually happening, which is step by step, day by day. It's not going to be, in my view, through spectacular events. The rallies and the demonstrations, they all matter. But I think that we can't put our faith in the spectacular. We have to put our faith in the day-to-day grind of just being this daily constant force of opposition and disapproval to Trump that many of you have been expressing in daily phone calls and daily communications to Senate and House offices, and increasingly to other offices too. You've also done a great job in calling and thanking senators and House members and attorney generals and others when they've done the right thing, which is a critical part of this, right? They need an incentive to also understand that when they do the right thing, that people are paying as much attention to that as they are when they do the wrong thing. And all of you have done a remarkable job in that. And I'm really proud of this community for doing that. And so where I think things sit right now is that I do think that, our early kind of understanding of how to oppose Trump was really heavily focused on the economic issues and the fiscal budget issues. I think now with what's happened with El Salvador and this unbelievable meeting and the defiance of the Supreme Court in the last few days, which continued, by the way, tonight, the daily report to the judge from the administration that they were supposed to be reporting on a daily basis what they are doing to get him home. They didn't add any new information today, so they're in open defiance of a 9-0 Supreme Court decision. We know, as I showed today in polling, there's no support for this in the public, right? Just like there's no support for his tariffs in the public. I mean, we're talking about support ranges in the 20s and 30s, right? If you drop below 40 on any issue, right, you're in a place of danger, and he's in danger zone on this stuff. And you're seeing the judges today. I mean, we'll hopefully talk more about this tomorrow in my writing, because things happened late in the afternoon and I didn't get to see everything. But, we also saw, we're moving towards contempt. The judge in the case with Garcia, right? He has now started a process of discovery and is going to have depositions of of Trump administration officials. My guess is they're not going to show up or they're not going to participate. But you're seeing now two different legal cases really start to move into that place of contempt. And I think the critical thing to realize here is that most of the country, the states, right? The state of California, the Democratic attorney generals, the courts are still operating as if the Constitution exists. It's just Trump and his team that are operating as if it doesn't exist and that doesn't apply to them, that the rule of law is a bother and it's immaterial. JD Vance put out a tweet last night where he essentially said that the rule of law is a bother. It's really hard, like it's too much work. It's very similar to how the Nazis talked about efficiency, right? It's very similar language, expediency and efficiency to overwhelm the human rights, democracy, rule of law, all the things that due process, right? All these things. And so I do think that their madness, their fanaticism, their extremism, their failure, there has become increasingly impossible for people to ignore. And I think it's weakening him. He's weakened as a figure. He's in a very different place. He's lost whatever narrow mandate that he had. There are huge now questions of legitimacy, in my view, around Trump. I don't refer to him as president anymore because if he's operating outside the constitutional order, we should not give him the conceit of referring to him an honorific title that he doesn't actually deserve, nor does he actually want, right? He doesn't see himself as the leader of a functioning democracy and of American democracy. He sees himself as a tyrant, a dictator, a guy who can just disappear people into a prison in El Salvador with no due process and ignore the Supreme Court. I don't know what's going to happen, and none of us do, but I am more confident tonight, that we are winning this than I was even a week ago. I think what's going on with the disappeared in El Salvador is just so un-American. I mean, I've used this line that Trump is the most un-American American in all of our history. There's no one who has more disregarded or diminished or degraded our Constitution, our creed, the American creed, what everything that made America great than Donald Trump. And I will say one last thing, and I'm not going to go on and do one of my really long talks tonight, is that the other thing I've been thinking about a lot recently is why, if he wants to make America strong, is he actually making us weak? And this is an area that I think, have to go down as a family with incredible aggression and ambition. Because, I think we're using terms to describe the early Trump era of oligarchy and fascism and nationalism. I mean, all these kinds of traditional terms. But if he was a strong man leader who wanted America to be strong in the world and for this to be a powerful nation that he could lead, he would be doing something very different than what he's actually doing, right? He's torching our alliances that have made us strong. We are more vulnerable to an outside kind of major attack or some kind of disruptive event in America today than we've ever been. He's been letting our guard down in dozens of different ways. So we're more vulnerable today and we're less safe today. We also are going to be less prosperous because of his economic strategies. We're dismantling the world-leading scientific and academic research community. We're putting these tariffs on, which are going to slow the economy, raise prices, alienate trading partners, alienate consumers all around the world. There is no possibility that his economic plan will result in us being more prosperous or the economy being stronger. That's not possible. This plan that he's pursuing is a recipe for significant national decline in the United States. So we're neither going to be more prosperous, nor are we going to be, more secure and safe in the world and stronger in the world. We're much weaker in the world. And also here at home, we're far weaker. We're losing our fundamental rights that, he's turning people against each other. This seems to be a strategy of sabotage, right? Not a strategy that is to make us strong. And I think it's why we have to be a little bit careful about the words that we use to describe his ideology, which is that I don't know that he fits into an easy box in some of these ideological terms. I don't think oligarchy is actually the issue. I think Trump and Republicans are the issue. I don't agree with Bernie and AOC in this, as amazing as they're being and how powerful they're being and inspiring they're being. I think that's the wrong target. I think something else is happening here. And I think that, to me, the great danger and fear in me is that Donald Trump is surrendering America to Russia, and that the possibility that we are in that he's in some kind of illicit alliance with probably our greatest enemy in modern times, is would explain why it is that rather than making us strong, he's making us weak. And I think that we have to, as part of what we talk about here at Hopium all the time, is that part of our job here, right, is to pull the curtain back from the wizard, to remind people the emperor has no clothes, is to not allow their frame and their language and their bullshit and their blather and all the lying that they do every day to become the way that we talk and understand things, right? Our job here is to start from our own place, our truth, our own understanding, and explain that to people. We don't respond to them, right? Because if you respond, then you're letting them set the agenda and the rhetorical frame. We have to build our own understandings here. This is what I do every day at Hopium, right? I try to start with a place not where they are, but where things actually are and where we need to go and where we need to be. And I think that one of the things that I've just been thinking about a lot, and I've been writing about this, but not in the way that I want to, because I haven't totally worked it out in my head, is that this fundamental question of why, if he says he's making us strong, he's actually making us weak, is really important. I think it's actually maybe the central question of this moment in time, because it is the idea that he is a strong man. Because imagine Donald Trump, if he wanted to be the dictator that ruled the world, right, and made America the global empire, he wouldn't be torching our alliances. He wouldn't be pissing off, vaporizing USAID, one of the most powerful tools we had to advance American interests. He wouldn't be dismantling the federal government. He could be charged of this big, burly government of the United States, and he's dismantling it and making it small. Everything he's doing looks far more like sabotage than it does like something like that he's advancing the American interest. And I think we have to really start reconciling and discussing this in a far more direct manner. I do think the shock and awe has worked to a degree rhetorically, right? They define the terms of the debate, but I think people are waking up. I mean, I really get the sense that there is an awareness that this guy is full of shit. He's betraying the country. He's a bad man, that he is all those things that all of us said he was, right? That we were unable to, convince people during the campaign that he is what he is. And again, what's happening with Trump now is that his, today in the morning consult, I mean, in the Economist YouGov poll, in the three groups critical to him winning, he's down 23 points, no, 21 points with 18 to 29-year-olds. He's down 46 points with Hispanics in job approval and 23 points with independents. He's torched his brand with the people that were critical to him winning already. And so what I just want to say to all of you is that I think that one of the big things that I also want to talk to you more about is that we have shown that through work and through engagement that people's minds can be changed, right? This is really important. People are in a very different place about Donald Trump than they were 2 months ago and 3 months ago. So what it means is that the goal that we had started here in January, which was to degrade him and to have people understand what he really was and not what they thought he was going to be, that work has been successful. That is not something that we have failed at. We have succeeded at that. He is in a deeply degraded place now as a political figure, and people's minds are changing. And what we have to realize is, yes, it's not fast enough, Simon. We need it to be more. But imagine voting for Donald Trump, and then immediately turning around and saying, I made a mistake. It's going to take a while for that process to happen. And what we know from the way that the data shows us is that his erosion on economic issues, which has been his central brand strength, we had the lowest we had the second lowest consumer confidence rating in the University of Michigan survey since the early 1950s in the last consumer confidence uh, survey done that was released last Friday. That's what's, so what's his job approval, which has come down 15, 16, 17 points, right? In a place where his disapproval is almost in the place where Biden's was when Biden got out of the race last summer, is that his job approval, I think, is a lagging indicator, meaning that the true understanding of where he is on these economic measures and on the tariffs, and he's in a much lower place on those things. And I will tell you, folks, on an issue, the economy, which is the number one issue for 45% of the country, and for independent voters and Hispanic voters and young people is the overwhelming number one issue. If he's down 20, 30 points on that, he is melting right now with the public. And what that means is we have to work as hard as we possibly can. We have to be information warriors. We have to make our calls. We have to support our candidates. We've been winning elections when we've gone head to head with them, right? We've been overperforming expectations. We are stronger today. They are weaker today. And we have to keep driving that fundamental dynamic. And if there's anything to take away from what's happened in the last few months, is that we have more power than we understand collectively. And as Cory Booker said in his remarkable speech, right? I need to get this right because I write it, but the people, I'm now blowing my own remark. Anyway, we have more power than we understand, and we have to stay engaged and keep working and keep expanding the circle of people who come to our place of understanding about where we are as a nation, the gravity of the threat that we face, and the necessity to leave it all on the playing field for our freedoms, for our families, and our future. I am proud to be in this fight with all of you. Let's get to questions. The people, yes, the people have more power than the people in power. Thank you. I do all this, I don't have anything written down when I do this with you guys. And so sometimes like I nail it and other times I know, thank you. Laughing is good. We all need to laugh a little bit. It's funny, I come here, I just want all of you to know that, and I'm going to yes, thank you. Laughing is important. Laughing matters. I just want you all to know that these meetings are very important for me, right? I use them to organize my thinking about everything. And also I want to put on a good show for you, right? And tens of thousands of people watch this outside of this live event that we're on right now. And I will tell you that tonight I had less fear and dread and anxiety than I've had in a long time. It may be completely misplaced. It may be irrational. But as somebody who studies this stuff for a living and been doing this for over 30 years full time, I am astounded at his decline and how rapid and severe and significant it is. Because I would just want to end with this last point. I'll get to questions. Is that in my conversation I had with Stuart Stevens, not this week, but a couple weeks ago, Stuart and I talked about how when presidents, when the impression of competency disappears, that it's very difficult for presidents to recover from that. And it happened with Bush. He said, "Look, I was a Bush guy." It happened with Katrina. Bush was never the same. He never recovered from Katrina. Excuse me. It happened with Biden and Afghanistan, where Biden went from being an old wise man to being an old man in some degree when that happened, right? He lost this kind of imprimatur of being experienced and capable, right? Because it seemed like such a mistake. I think Trump is having this happen now, not only on the tariffs, which are debilitating and devastating for his brand and for the economy and for all of us, but what's happening now with his disappearing of people, which is just so beyond the pale. I mean, the fact that Joe Rogan, for example, a few weeks ago, sort of said this stuff is wildly inappropriate. I thought they were going to get rid of undocumented immigrants. They're getting rid of legal immigrants. And by the way, there's now been two major newspaper um, investigative pieces on the people who went to Venezuela. And both of them have concluded that it's 85, 90% of the people who were sent to sent to El Salvador did not have criminal records in the United States. And almost every single one of them are legal immigrants and were here legally. And so he's disappearing people who are legal immigrants without criminal records. And I want to just say to, Chris Van Hollen is a good friend. We'll get him on here. I've been friends with Senator Van Hollen, for a very long time. And I'm very proud of him. What he did today, I didn't share the video today, but he was so articulate and so powerful today in his statements from El Salvador. And by the way, in the same day that he only was able to meet with the vice president when it wasn't able to go to CCOT, the prison, Republican Congress people went and took photographs of themselves in front of the prisoners, like Kristi Noem did. So a senator who represents Maryland, who has this guy as his constituent, was not able to go into the prison, but Republicans doing photo ops of themselves, were able to get there. And this is just a farce. We're so much better than that. We deserve so much more than this. We're a great and good country. We've been betrayed by these guys, and part of our job is to reclaim the greatness and goodness of America together. Yes, abhorrent behavior. I'm totally on board on that. Let me go to Lincoln is sending me sort of a sense of where the questions are. Um, Yeah, a couple things. The letter. So first of all, there have been a bunch of questions about why Trump's approval rating matters. I covered that in these remarks, which is that the approval rating. So the way to think about what happens with his approval rating is that every Republican politician in the country who's up for reelection this or is running for election is running this year, next year, polls, right? And the baseline data for every poll is the job approval of the president. And part of what happened with Biden is that people who were up for reelection in 2022 and running in 2022, when they did their polls, whether it was for governor or state representative or for Congress, they did Biden's approval rating. And so everybody knew, like the whole family knew where Biden was. It wasn't a secret, it was in the public polling, but it was being confirmed in states. And so the entire kind of apparatus of the Democratic electoral apparatus understood that Biden was in trouble, right, through their own independent polling. Well, that's happening right now with Republicans, right? They're doing their own independent polling. And these House Republicans know that if Trump's approval rating in their district is -10, that they're going to lose. And that they can't overcome that weight on top of them, right? It would be highly unusual, as we did in 2022. And I've laid out theories about why I thought 2022 was an unusual election. But just the traditional forces of gravity, right, is that these guys are polling now, and because Republicans do poll, they use polling in some ways more than we do, right? They are poll driven, even though they're ideological extremists. They still poll a lot, and they have a lot of money, so there's a lot of polling. And they are seeing Trump's approval rating. What's happening is Republican politicians are coming to a conclusion that they're going to have a really hard time winning their election next year under the current trajectory. And there's a limit to their loyalty to him. There's limits. We just saw it today. 12 Republican House members essentially said they're not going to support the big, beautiful bill in its current form. And the thing is, there is no other form. The only way they get the savings that they want is by cutting Medicaid, by close to $1 trillion. And 12 House Republicans said today they're not going to go along. Last week, 7 Senate Republicans signed on to a bill to claw back Trump's tariff authority, right? And so the way this works, I think that if Trump's numbers hadn't gone down, I don't know what Harvard would have done. If Trump was up in a very stratospheric place in his approval rating and in polling, I don't know that Harvard would have been as aggressive as they were, right, on this week. And so the approval rating is sort of the coin of the realm. It's the measure of his political strength. And in a town where political strength, if this is a huge mosh pit, right, and we're in sort of a WWE every day where ambitious politicians are all wrestling with each other for being king of the hill, whatever it is, the king is weak right now. He doesn't have the public behind him. And yeah, this really matters. And people, by the way, in our family, because I get this a lot in Blue Sky, right? Because there's snark and cynicism is sort of the standard behavior in Blue Sky. It's a little disappointing to me because here we don't believe in cynicism and snark, right? I mean, hopium is the opposite of that. We believe that we can make things better. We have faith that through good work that we can make things better. Is that his approval rating declining is a big fucking deal. And it's why you're starting to see more ambitious defiance of him, and that becomes courage becomes contagious, right? I mean, that's the only way this can work. There is no external event. Zeus isn't going to come down from Mount Olympus and hit Trump with a lightning bolt, right? Like we have to. The only way civil societies get out of this is by doing what we're doing every day and grinding it out. There is no silver bullet. There is no magic event. There is not going to be a protest where the government's going to topple, right? It has to be this daily grind where our side gets stronger and they get weaker. And you know what? If we had had this conversation in January, we were on the floor and in a puddle of water, and he was towering high. And now we're in a completely different place. And that's my whole point is that minds can change, things can get better, but they only get better if we do the work and continue to pound and pound and pound every day. Um, let me let me see what else Lincoln's got here for me. Um, yeah, letter to America. I'm pushing this really hard. I think all of you know, for those of you who are new here, the premise is that we need to open up a second front beyond the economic conversation, which I think we're in a very strong place on, and it is the most important issue, and we need to continue to dominate there and be aggressive there. But I think we can open up a second front, and a second front that starts creating a clear sense for voters about Trump's abandonment of the constitutional order, right? His illegal activities. He's committed more crimes in recent months than probably any American in all American history. He's his selling out our alliances in America to Russia, and this sort of other basket of issues revolving around betrayal of democracy and our freedoms to complement and strengthen this initial argument we're making around the economy. And to do that, I've called for us, for the congressional Democrats or the attorney generals or the governors or our leaders to do what Harvard did this week, which is to write a letter to America explaining, as we did in the Declaration of Independence, the injuries, abuses, and usurpations, to use the founder's language, of Mad King George, and where they let facts be submitted to a candid world. And I think we need to do that now too. And I think that what we don't have is we don't have a rhetorical framework to be able to describe all the ways that the tariffs are unconstitutional. He has no legal authority in addition to the tariffs being devastating economically for us in the world, he also has no authority to actually levy them. And this is, the greatest abuse of power in American history, in my view, even more so than disappearing people into El Salvador, because it's affecting literally every single person in the entire world, these tariffs, right? Not just, a few hundred people in El Salvador. And it's why, today Gavin Newsom and the government of California sued, following Tim Kaine's lead of getting this resolution introduced to hopefully get a vote in the Senate to be able to roll back the tariffs, right? To claw back their constitutional authority, which is all about him appropriating powers that he does not actually have under our Constitution and under our law. Gavin Newsom, the government of California today, sued Trump on these same grounds that the levies that are being put on, for California businesses having to pay 10% tax now and stuff coming in, that he has no authority to do this. And he doesn't. It makes all of this even that much more horrible. And so we're in a place now where on the issue of El Salvador and the Gulag, and also on the tariffs, we're going into this place where we have to have language that we can go to the American people with to explain what he's doing and why this is an unprecedented betrayal of our democracies, our freedoms, our rights, our civil liberties, and all these things. And we don't have common language around this now, right? And we need it. And so I've called for this letter to America that would be a 2 to 3 page document, like the Declaration of Independence, that would spell out to the American people from our leaders why they believe that what Trump is doing is unconstitutional, illegal, and an extraordinary betrayal of the country. And because we don't have common universal language. And if we do this, that's a document that can be read at every town hall meeting. It can be read at every protest and rally. It can be every time there's a gathering, we can refer to this letter to America from our congressional leaders. And it creates a common, simple frame for us to understand the gravity of what's happening here and his abuses, injuries, and usurpations, to use that line. So that's part of there were some questions about that. And how's that going? Guys, I'm lobbying the crap out of this. I mean, you've seen me talk to politicians about it. I'm having lots of private conversations. I think that it's possible it was a little bit ahead of the moment. I think though the moment may have caught up with the idea in the last few weeks, right? And again, this combination of the tariffs and the outrageous ignoring of the Supreme Court 9-0 decision is putting his lawlessness and his abandonment of the Constitution front and center in front of the public in a way that it wasn't a few weeks ago. And it should have been, by the way, by his illegal, unconstitutional dismantling of the U.S. government, which is this other piece. I mean, the triad, if you want to say it, is the tariffs, the civil liberties, the lack of due process, and third is the dismantling of our government. These are all unconstitutional actions. He's operating completely outside the constitutional order. And, part of our job as proud patriots who love our country is that we have to respond to this, not just as he's making you poorer and less prosperous, which is important. But when we go into this place that I'm describing, what we become is patriots. We become the defenders of America. We become operating from love of country and not partisanship. We are wrapping ourselves in the flag. We're joining with Washington and Jefferson and Lincoln and FDR and all of the other great American presidents against someone who's committing an unprecedented betrayal of everything that made America great. That to me is an incredibly powerful positioning that we have not yet seized, that I think will make our economic arguments stronger, right? And make the indictment of Trump even more powerful. That's what I'm trying to do with a letter to America. And what I appreciate is that some of you in the last few days, as you've also kind of woken up to the necessity of this, are pushing this letter on your congressional leaders, on your attorney generals, on your governors, on your Democratic Party leaders in your states, right? As something that just simply must happen. It's a must to have. It's not an option. And I'm going to keep lobbying for it as hard as I can. And I think I'm grateful for all of you who have been part of this. I think the other piece of that is that I do think it's time, as I wrote today, for criminal referrals. I mean, the first time I wrote about criminal referrals was probably at the beginning of February, probably. And what Elon Musk and Doge are doing, and we're learning more and more about the details of Doge, and it's clearly they're breaking dozens and dozens of laws every day. Elon and Trump have been on a crazy crime spree against the country. And we need to create this language to help put into context that they're not making things more efficient. I mean, getting rid of disease monitoring, you know, uh, um, systems right after the worst pandemic in American history, right? Doing that has nothing to do with efficiency. I mean, what they're doing is they're sabotaging, as I said, the country. They're not making the government more efficient. They're breaking it. And I will say that if I look back at these last few months, my greatest disappointment is that we have failed to make that case about the ongoing assault on our government, which, to repair the things that have been broken are going to be extraordinarily costly and take decades to rebuild already. And we, as somebody who lives here and understands the city, have been working in and out of government and with administrations for decades. We're seeing the carnage is far worse than people understand, I think. And that's why I feel that we have failed to make a clear case to the American people about the sabotage and damage Trump is doing. I do think now we have a new opening and we have to seize it together. And I'm just grateful for all the work that all of you have done to help push all of this. Let me just say, got some questions about the DNC. I hope all of you have given a little bit of money, so you're getting their emails. Just give $5. You don't have to give a lot of money, but sign up. Ken Martin's a very competent chair. I was down in Florida a few weeks ago at the National Finance Council meeting because of the money that we've raised here, and I got to meet with many of the senior staff of the DNC. Roger Lau, who's the executive director, used to work for me, and I know a lot of these people. We have a very strong team in place. They've started regular war room meetings now with people like me, with content creators and people with large audiences. We had our first one last Friday. It was a baby step, but it was incredibly professionally run. The team did a great job. It was like a serious meeting of serious people wanting to do serious work. It was great. The tone, the sentiment in the meeting was very professional, focused on mission. It was great. The People's Cabinet idea is something we're still learning about. which is a way for them to have, and I've said this before, and for those of you who don't know this, I'm not a big fan of the People's Cabinet. And the reason why is that our system doesn't really allow it the way it operates in a parliamentary democracy. The people who believe they have those jobs of being the opponent of the Republican cabinet are the ranking members. We actually have people who have jobs. Our system in England, right? They have a cabinet secretary and then they have a shadow secretary. Here, we have a chairman and then what's called a ranking member or a chairperson and a ranking member. So our system builds in the opposition into the legislative body itself, into Congress itself. It doesn't have to be a shadow. It's actually in the Congress. And so there are people who are the opponents of the cabinet officials in the House and Senate who believe they have the job to be the shadow cabinet, right? So I think that what's important about what the DNC is doing is the DNC knows that they need to fill the void and to be much louder and more ambitious and more aggressive, and they're trying really hard, really quickly, frankly, without a lot of money and without a lot of staff. I mean, money is not flowing back into any parts of our family right now in any kind of significant way, with the except maybe a Midas touch, right? And so they're doing their best, and they're under very difficult circumstances because there's such high expectations. And yet, the DNC had 100 staff when Ken Martin came in. Last summer they had 600 staff, right? And so the building doesn't have the capacity to operate at the level that we need it to yet, but they are making strides and progress. And I also want to say, for those of you who've been out in the States, these town hall meetings we've been doing in red districts, we haven't, the party and the DNC and the DCCC, they've never done anything like this before. This is a huge leap for the party and the party apparatus to adapt to the new moment that we're in. And so I'm pleased with the progress being made and sort of the official Washington stuff, but it's obviously still not sufficient. And there's much more that has to get done. And I think Cory Booker kind of lit the town on fire and really inspired a lot of other senators. I don't know that Chris Van Hollen would have gone to El Salvador if it wasn't for Cory's kind of lifting everybody up. And I've been in conversations with people in the Senate in the last few weeks, and there's no question that Cory really kind of lifted up all the other Democratic senators and lifted up staff and gave them a permission structure to be more ambitious and to do more. And I'm, very Cory's a good friend. We'll have him here. I've known Cory since he ran for the city council the very first time. My old organization was a PAC that I ran. It was a think tank for a while, but before that, it was a PAC. I helped Gavin Newsom get elected mayor of San Francisco in 2003. I helped Cory get elected to the city council. I mean, I was involved in the early stages of the careers of many of the people that are now running our party. Kamala Harris, campaigned for me when I ran for chairman of the party 20 years ago. She was one of my national co-chairs. I mean, I've known a lot of these people, and you'll see this in the interviews, right? I mean, Senator Kaine and I go way back. We've done work together. I have a lot of, I know a lot of these senators and House members personally for a long time, and you'll see that in the interviews. The other thing I just will say is that we are going to start moving towards more live events in the afternoons and more, video interviews. There are also, those podcasts are now showing up on Spotify, on YouTube, and also they're going to be on iTunes very soon. But there's going to be probably a daily email from me in the morning and an afternoon video most days, not every day, of an interview with me with somebody who's making news and moving the needle. And we're going to be going to Substack Live. And so one of the things that, if you want to be part of the live stuff, you need to go into settings. We have and make sure you turn on the option to be able to get notified about the live activity. I'm not going to try to overwhelm you. I mean, there are other Substacks now that are sending out 5, 6, 7, 8 emails a day, posts a day. We're going to go to 2 maybe on most days, and still 1 on many other days. I recognize that, and I've gotten this feedback from you. There's just only so much time in the day, and I'm respectful of that. I've been a little surprised, to be honest, to see other Substacks being posting 5, 6 times a day, because it means that people feel like they can't keep up, and then their relationship to the entity, I think, attenuates, it weakens. Part of the reason I think Hopium's been so successful is that, yeah, I mean, my stuff that I write every day is dense and there's a lot there, there's a lot of options, but it's manageable. And I think that part of my job here has been to calibrate. I get up every day and I'm trying to sell you guys not a lot of stuff, but the most important things that I'm seeing that day. I try to curate what's happening and make it easy to accept accessible for you every day. And I'm going to continue to do that. Let me see other things from Lincoln, and then I'll also let me go into questions here. I want to just mention what Carla Poole has a question about. I wrote about the hacks at the NLRB today. It was in Hopium today. And this may seem obscure because it's an agency, an independent agency no one's ever heard of, the National Labor Relations Board, or many people may not have heard of. But what we learned was that, the story that I referenced, the NPR, this is like a bombshell story that went off yesterday because we've had inklings of, why in the world, if they were making the government more efficient, did they need access to our private data? Why do they need access to the treasury payment systems? And it's why there's something nefarious happening here that isn't about efficiency. And, we can all speculate about what that is. And there's a variety of things that we think it may be, right? Trump and Elon enriching themselves by stealing data, the fact they're selling it or trading it to other countries like Russia, right? But Doge is operating as if they're like a landing crew for a hostile foreign power that's trying to, weaken the United States, right? They took over the USAIP. I don't know if people understand this, but if you know Washington, as you're leaving to go out and on the mall to go out to Virginia, there was a building built 15 years ago, maybe. I'm dating myself probably, but it's not in the traditional Washington style. It's this very kind of modern building, this arguably the most beautiful building in the city. It's the United States Institute of Peace, which was there to generate, you know, strategies like a think tank, right? To congressionally mandated, not part of the executive branch. And it was part of the institutions that we established to advance our interests around the world, right? Like USAID, like Radio Free Europe, and all these other tools of global engagement, global democracy. And that building, and this is why I had Don Beyer come on a few days ago, the Doge broke into that building, basically, installed their own people. It's not part of the executive branch. Trump had no authority to do this. And they fired every single person there, and they've moved Doge into this building. So they basically stole a $500 million building from the United States. It's hard to believe, and the other day I actually drove that way and I was like, wow, there's Elon's crew is go lit. They depopulated this huge building and gave themselves the prettiest building with some of the nicest views in the city because they're spoiled Silicon Valley shitheads, right? And they couldn't just have a normal office. They had to get something with these sweeping views out over the Potomac and in a modern building that looks maybe a little bit more like the Valley than these old terrible buildings, the Valley or Moscow or wherever the fuck these guys are from, right? And so, they have been operating like this thing that's almost as if the country had been occupied by a foreign government and that they had an advance crew that was coming in and ripping the country's governing structure apart, and vaporizing entire agencies and departments. And what happened, and so we've known these stories about them breaking into payment systems, and the IRS senior team all left IRS last week because they were demanding that the IRS give private data for the immigration enforcement authorities. The entire senior team of the IRS quit last week. People are not breaking laws, they're not violating laws, and they're fighting these guys when they want access. Those people are usually getting fired. But what happened here really matters, which is that a cybersecurity expert who was protecting the private data at the National Labor Relations Board has now become a whistleblower, and he has now detailed what happened. And among the things that happened is A, they didn't keep logs on the activity they had in the cyber domain, which is a practice that's highly unusual. They disabled the parts of the system that tracked what everybody did when they went into the system, which in the article they say is the kind of thing that foreign hackers do when foreign hackers break into government systems to cover their tracks, right? And the third thing is that when he complained and was fighting with them, one day he went to his office, and on his office door were private details about his life and a photograph of him walking his dog from overhead, meaning that they sent a drone to go track him and took photos of him to physically to intimidate him, right? This is not the actions of fellow patriots who love America, right? Who respect their fellow Americans who are just getting up and doing their work every day. This feels like it's the work of a foreign power who hates America, who's trying to destroy America and steal our data and do nefarious things and malevolent things to the United States, including the people that work in these places. And so he's become a whistleblower. And if you go to Hopium today, read this NPR article. It's jaw-dropping, but it creates a window into understanding what they're doing in every agency and department that they've penetrated, which is there is some clear systemic effort to suck all of the data about the American people out all of these departments and agencies. And let's be very clear. These young men, whoever they are, wherever they come from, and they're mostly men, right? They're serial criminals. They've broken hundreds of laws. They need to go to jail for the rest of their lives. The Congress has been lame for not issuing criminal referrals to them about what they're doing here. The scale of the illegality, the lawlessness, the unconstitutional actions that we've witnessed, it is a stain. I mean, it is in some ways like we have not responded adequately as a family to what's happened here, the gravity of what's happening here. We've and the things that are getting broken that are going to be very hard to repair. You know, Trump now wants to start moving major departments and agencies out of Washington. Why? Right? Like, what's the purpose of any of this stuff? It's all to make us weaker and not stronger. And and I come back to this basic question, which is why, if Donald Trump is a strong man and a fascist and a nationalist, and wants to be this big towering figure, why is he making his country that he runs weaker and not stronger? It doesn't make a lot of sense, right? The answers are not good answers to this question that we can come up with because obviously one of the most obvious explanations is that he's compromised and he's working with Putin to end the America of the Four Freedoms and to punish us for having won the Cold War. That still remains one of the most reasonable explanations for what we're witnessing here. And I think it's something that I think what happened, the other thing that happened in this NLRB thing is that they found Russian IP addresses in this mess, meaning that some of this data may have been getting shipped out to Russia. And so now that that's a possibility, this all gets the gravity of everything here and sort of this idea that, oh, they're just going around and like making things more efficient and making things better, right? Meanwhile, Elon's, giving himself tens of billions of dollars worth in contracts, trying to steal the aviation security system in the United States, taking a $6 billion contract from the Pentagon, lining his own pockets, right? Trump is doing events for him on the lawn, the most corrupt activity we've ever can imagine, right? And so there is deep malevolence behind all of this. And, we have to fight harder to get to the bottom of what's going on here. And hats off to NPR for what was really truly a bombshell story. It's in Hopium today. Yes, look, I once wrote several months ago, somebody just commented on this. Either Elon goes to jail or we have a democracy. There's no in between, right? And because no, I don't know that any person's committed as many crimes other than maybe Trump in all of our history than what Elon's done since he's been here. The other thing for those of you who have a Wall Street Journal subscription, and I'm going to try to figure out if I can get a free gift subscription, there's a story that ran last night, this morning, about Elon having dozens and dozens of kids, like far many more kids than we understood, and that Elon is actually trying to build a compound where the women that he's been with, not his wives or his girlfriends or anything, live and raise his kids. He sees them as a legion, and that this is honestly one of the craziest things that all of us will ever read in our lifetime. And that we also now know from the reporting that Elon was soliciting women to join him on X, that he was using the power of X and going into DMs on X and targeting women that he liked on X and started asking whether they would have his child and he would pay them, right? This is the most depraved, crazy shit that we can possibly imagine. The idea that this lunatic had the level of influence that he's had over our country. It's just unbelievable. And yeah, we have yeah, Handmaid's Tale stuff. It's actually in some ways worse than Handmaid's Tale. It's more like a sex cult, right? Where there's a single leader like Koresh or somebody having dozens and dozens of women that he's having children with. It's fucking insane. And it is unbelievable this great and good country has been subject to this extremism, this fanaticism, this lunacy that we've been subject to. Let me just see if there's any other questions just to close with is um, yeah, listen, I mean, we're at time and let me just say, love you guys. Thank you for being part of this. I mean, I often talk about how I think what we're all struggling with is how to be put ourselves to highest and best use in this time of incredible crisis for the country. You guys have allowed me to do that, and it's a blessing, right? I get up every day working as hard as I can. We have 150,000 people now, part of Hopium. It's amazing. I mean, we're competing with these large entities that have dozens of people involved in them. We're holding our own in terms of audience. I work, 7 days a week. I ask you to leave it all on the playing field. I got to do the same thing. But I just can't thank you enough for, in this time of crisis, for allowing me to know that every day I feel like I'm doing my best and working as hard as I can and making the biggest possible difference. As somebody who's not an elected official, who's not in government, right? Those of us who are outside, there are limits to how much we can do. And I really feel that you guys, through your generosity and your support, financial support, you're growing Hopium, you're sharing it with others, buying group subscriptions and so on, and gift subscriptions. You've allowed me in a point in my life where, you've heard me say this, I'm doing this every day for the country in the abstract sense of the greatness of America, but I'm doing it for my three kids and who are 24 and 22 and 19, whose futures and their opportunities are being stolen by this madman. And that what motivates me every day, I'm in the sun of my, the painting here you can see behind me this way is a painting of a cardinal that my son Jed did in high school. He was an athlete and a macho man, but he was also a pretty good painter, right? Which was really cool. And there are a series of painters in my family we can talk about one night. And an artist in our family, in the Rosenberg side of the family. And I'll just say that, what we're doing here, the passion, the grit, the fight, the do every day, I really do believe that this community has been an important leader in teaching people throughout the country what was required of us now. And that we went to work the first day that Trump came into office. I didn't talk about the elections. I said, we got to call Congress and we got to build support. Like we immediately shifted to a different strategy based on my years of being here. And I think we were early advocates for town halls. We were early advocates for amicus briefs. We were early advocates for shadow hearings. We were early advocates for um, daily press conferences. We were early advocates for this kind of DNC, DCCC cooperation that we're being doing. We were played roles in winning in Wisconsin, right? We have been meaningfully involved in the electoral wins. We did more than talk here, and we talk and we debate and we discuss. We went to work for our country and we have made a huge difference. And so I just want to end tonight by saying thank you, everybody, for what you're doing for America, for our kids and our grandkids. We got to leave it all on the table for them. They deserve better than what they're being given. That's our job now, is to make it better for them, given how much damage and destruction has happened in the country. And we got to go fight with everything we got every day. And I just want to end by saying we are stronger today and he is weaker. And next week, I want to come here and be able to say to you, we're stronger still and he's weaker still. And we just grind it out and keep driving this guy down and keep building this opposition movement into something powerful that will someday end this terrible era of MAGA, restore America to its greatness and its goodness, and build the kind of future and democracy that our kids and our grandkids that we were given, that they deserve as we had when we were growing up. Love you guys. Take care.